Every single morning at 8:47, a pristine luxury SUV slides into the front row of a corporate parking structure.
The man behind the wheel handles creative client strategies, pulling in a respectable $94,000 annually.
He intentionally secures the most prominent spot available, ensuring his shiny imported vehicle remains completely visible from the main executive boardroom windows upstairs.
To him, this automobile isn't merely mechanical transit. It is an active statement of status, supported entirely by an exhausting monthly obligation he can scarcely manage.
Meanwhile, 25 minutes earlier, another employee quietly occupies a remote stall at the far boundary of the very same lot.
She commands the entire logistical network for the enterprise, taking home roughly $112,000 each year.
Her daily commute happens inside a plain 6-year-old compact sedan purchased entirely with upfront savings, featuring a minor scuff on the side panels that she deliberately ignores.
But if you look beneath the surface of these two parallel careers, the true ledger reveals an astonishing contrast that most people never see coming. The individual driving the flashy lease possesses a total financial cushion of just $17,000, weighed down heavily by revolving consumer debts, high interest lifestyle balances,
and a microscopic retirement account. In absolute contrast, the woman piloting the unglamorous commuter vehicle sits on an accumulated portfolio exceeding $1.1 million.
One individual simulates affluence, while the other actually commands it.
How is it possible for two professionals inside the exact same enterprise, earning comparable baseline compensation, to inhabit entirely separate economic universes?
The answer isn't a secret inheritance. It is a permanent divergence in daily choices that begins the moment they pick a set of keys.
This deep dive uncovers the underlying reasons why true self-made millionaires routinely opt for incredibly ordinary vehicles that completely defy public expectations.
It is not because their bank accounts restrict them, but because their fundamental relationship with capital functions on a completely different frequency than the rest of society.
Let us unpack the cold data that explains this phenomenon.
Authentic research confirms that the middle of the pack price paid by affluent individuals for their personal transportation sits right around $1,367.
Even for those possessing 10 million or more, that baseline only inches up to roughly 42,000.
Think about that reality for a brief moment. The typical household vehicle transaction across the country has surged past $48,000.
This means ordinary citizens are routinely overextending themselves to purchase transportation that costs significantly more than what actual millionaires allocate for theirs.
An extensive automotive behavior study recently disclosed that 61% of domestic households earning over $250,000 annually refuse to purchase luxury badges.
Instead, they choose practical utility vehicles, reliable imports, or standard trucks. These are families who could easily clear the balance on a premium European cruiser without blinking, yet they consciously decide to navigate their daily lives in basic sedans or work trucks.
The dominant badge is favored by genuine high-net worth individuals are predictable, mainstream Japanese imports and domestic utility lines.
High-end luxury options do not even crack the top 3 slots on the statistical breakdown. Furthermore, less than a quarter of true millionaires operate a vehicle from the current calendar year.
The vast majority operate reliable transport that has been on the road for several seasons, accumulating reasonable mileage.
They realize a truth that modern consumer culture works desperately to conceal from you.
Vehicles represent the absolute fastest destroyer of personal capital inside the household budget, operating as a relentless drain on your future security.
A car is a melting ice cube that depreciates daily. The moment you execute the purchase agreement, the asset plunges roughly 20% in value over the initial 12 months.
Within 5 seasons, nearly half of that original baseline sticker price has evaporated into thin air.
Despite this clear financial reality, the typical monthly vehicle obligation nationwide has escalated to an unprecedented $767. Multi-year lending terms spanning 7 full winters are now treated as completely standard arrangements.
This structural shift means millions of consumers spend years trapped in negative equity, owing vastly more to the lending institution than the deteriorating piece of metal is actually worth on.
Open market, they willingly lock themselves into massive recurring drains instead of positioning that same capital into productive wealth, generating assets. Let us break down the exact mathematical reality of these two distinct paths, because the numbers do not lie.
Our first professional signs a short-term lease for his premium European SUV, committing over $800 every single month.
By the time his 36-month agreement concludes, $30,000 has vanished completely from his balance sheet, leaving him with zero ownership equity.
Because his entire identity is tied to looking prosperous, he immediately signs a fresh lease for another high-end model, repeating this cycle for 3 decades of his active working career.
Our second professional takes her $22,000 and buys a dependable sedan outright.
She maintains it diligently for 8 years, averaging a true total cost of ownership of just $330 monthly.
When she finally decides to transition, she collects a significant residual payout from the sale, combines it with modest savings, and secures another dependable pre-owned option.
What happens when you compound the difference between these two distinct mindsets over a full career timeline?
The $500 monthly surplus saved by opting for utility over vanity, redirected consistently into an index fund averaging historical market returns, swells into an absolute fortune of
Approximately $745,000.
This isn't a hypothetical projection. It is the mathematical consequence of prioritizing long-term accumulation over short-term social performance.
It represents the literal boundary between true self-determination and deep retirement anxiety.
The vast majority of affluent households built their foundations without trust funds or corporate windfalls.
Authentic wealth surveys reveal that 88% of modern millionaires are entirely self-made, achieving their positions through a disciplined gap between total intake and actual lifestyle.
Output, the decision to reject premium automotive status symbols, is often directly responsible for more than half of their total net worth.
Statistics show that 94% of wealthy individuals consistently live below their baseline means, and surprisingly, 1/3 of them never even touched a 6-figure salary during their
Peak earning years. The top professions occupying these lists include educators, accountants, and engineers. Instructors who are culturally understood to be modest earners frequently accumulate greater security than high-earning medical specialists or technology operators.
Why does this occur? Because your professional title never dictates your ultimate financial destination. The size of your savings gap does.
There are 3 distinct pillars that make automotive spending the ultimate divider of economic outcomes.
The first factor is sheer volume. Outside of primary housing costs, your transportation choice represents the largest single recurring drain on your household cash flow. When you inflate this specific category by several $100s beyond what is required for safe, dependable transit, you completely cripple your ability to execute other positive financial
behaviors.
You can eliminate every minor digital subscription, pack your own lunch daily, and minimize trivial expenses, but those small changes will never overcome a massive multi-$100 structural
Monthly deficit. Focus entirely on the massive financial rocks, not the tiny pebbles. The second pillar is extended duration.
Trivial luxury splurges are temporary, but an overextended vehicle contract remains active for 5, 6, or 7 full years.
Because this extraction happens automatically, your psychology adapts to the drain, eventually viewing it as an unavoidable cost of modern existence.
But it was never fixed.
It was a voluntary choice executed during a single afternoon at a showroom.
The third pillar is intense social expectation. No other standard commercial purchase carries the same amount of visible identity signaling.
Your vehicle is constantly evaluated by colleagues, relatives, and neighbors, broadcasting an unspoken narrative about your perceived prosperity.
This narrative is almost always a total illusion, yet society devours it completely.
Our luxury leasing professional spends over $1,200 monthly once premium insurance premiums, specialized maintenance, and high-octane fuel are fully accounted for. This consumes an unhealthy 15% of his gross intake on an asset that loses value daily.
Financial best practices dictate that total transport outlays should remain strictly under 10%.
Meanwhile, our operations leader allocates just 5% of her gross intake toward her dependable transit.
The resulting annual difference allows her to aggressively feed diversified index funds year after year, while the luxury driver collects temporary compliments that yield zero financial return.
True financial builders are consistently resistant to lifestyle inflation. They view an automobile strictly as an industrial instrument designed to navigate geographic space.
The exact instant you transform it into an emotional badge of honor, it shifts from an asset into a massive psychological and structural liability.
Spending heavily today in desperate anticipation of future affluence simply transforms you into a permanent dependent of your next corporate paycheck, regardless of how impressive your base salary
appears on paper. But what about the classic pushback regarding mechanical reliability and hidden repair costs?
Let us address that misconception directly with historical reliability data.
Independent automotive evaluations consistently rank mainstream Japanese manufacturers as the absolute most dependable choices on the modern highway.
A clean 4-year-old mid-size import priced modestly will easily clear 200,000 miles of continuous operation with nothing more than routine fluid changes.
These are highly advanced, durable machines engineered to outlast the longest financing agreements available.
The sweet spot of true wealth accumulation involves acquiring a reliable, well-maintained vehicle that has already cleared its steepest initial depreciation drop, keeping total outlays entirely
Predictable when you track the lifetime financial trajectory of two drivers over 3 decades. The ultimate contrast is staggering.
The consumer who remains trapped in a perpetual cycle of new vehicle financing drops hundreds of thousands of dollars on short-lived premium vehicles, exiting the timeline with minimal residual
value. The strategic saver spends a mere fraction of that total amount over her entire life, consistently investing the massive monthly premium difference.
That simple, disciplined redirection easily builds nearly $1 million in liquid wealth. Ultimately, this structural choice reflects a much deeper psychological paradigm. True financial security requires making total peace with looking entirely ordinary to a world that values superficial presentation.
The vehicle you choose to navigate the streets is never just a collection of metal and tires. It is your personal economic philosophy made completely visible to the world.
If you want to transform your trajectory, you must transform that underlying philosophy first. Are you ready to stop performing wealth and finally start building it?
If this perspective challenged how you view your daily financial choices, hit the like button and subscribe to Winds of Thought to join our community of strategic minds.